Hello, and welcome to another weekly reading. This is such an interesting combination of oils to have popped out. To be honest, I was like, patchouli and eucalyptus, will they even work together? And I did my little sniff test where you hold both open bottles under your nose and do circles. I always teach that in my aromatherapy so you can have a little idea of how they'll mingle. And this is going in my diffuser. I think it's really important right now, the patchouli for the deep grounding and rooting, and the eucalyptus for staying clear of mind and open and expansive. So this is a great combination that's come up today. For this week, we have Mercury stationing retrograde in Leo, and I've been speaking about how it feels to me like this will reactivate Mercury's last retrograde, which he did alongside Venus. So Venus's last retrograde earlier in the year. And that was in the sign of Aries Pisces, which is very activated right now. Saturn, who recently entered Aries as well, has just stationed retrograde on Sunday of last week to move back into those degree ranges as well. Neptune has already stationed retrograde in Aries to move back into the Pisces region. It'll take them some time, but the fact is that's being reactivated over there. Mercury retrograde in a fire sign is going to reactivate that process as well. And it's reactivating the Mars retrograde, which was in Leo and Cancer. So for me, this is the beginning of a big reflection week. And to be fair, the cards are in agreement with me. We also have the last quarter moon this week. So I've brought in this beautiful little dream without fear, love without limits. And I feel like that's really important for us as well as we explore the Pluto in Aquarius, all the outer planets, Uranus in Gemini, and Neptune, and in this case Saturn in Aries, all of them moving into these very different dynamics, these more yang dynamics is going to really change, and we do need to dream without fear and love without limits. So choose a card between 1 and 4. That'll give you a slightly more personalized reading for the week, and let's jump into the week. Remember, this is not a personalized reading. Here's our overall weekly cards. And this feels really, look, right way up, upside down, right way up, upside down. So we can already see the kind of ups and downs that we might be experiencing. Also, 2 major arcana cards. So they're the upright ones. For me, that's already an overall indication that we're on time, we're on purpose, everything is as it should be. But from a more personalized level, the minor arcana, it might not feel that way. And I feel like that's something I've been saying to a lot of clients in the last few years. You're doing better than you think. So a lot of our darker stuff is being pulled out and it feels icky and uncomfortable, but that's because we're on that growth edge and it's meant to be comfortable. How often have you heard me say there's no growth in the comfort zone and there's no comfort in the growth zone? So this icky that we've been feeling, this challenge that we've been pushed into is actually happening for us, not to us. Okay, gosh, I'm bringing out all my favorite quotes today. Mercury. Okay, we start this weekly reading with the Hermit card, and the Hermit card really is telling us that we need to go inwards. We need to become more reflective, and that's what retrogrades do. And I want to remind you, Saturn has also stationed retrograde. I don't usually speak as much about the planets that aren't personal planets stationing retrograde, because although it is important, it's sometimes less immediately obvious or overtly obvious to us, whereas Mercury retrograde we can all kind of notice quite quickly and quite easily. And it is those things like make sure your communication is clear, double check your bookings, your travel bookings, read through things extra carefully if you're signing contracts. You know, it's those small day-to-day things, car tire blowing out or suddenly realizing your car's overdue for a service, transport, communication, and business, really. Okay, and retrograde, although the planet is not literally moving backwards, retrogrades indicate this backward movement and reflective process from the perspective of Earth, really. But from an energetic, that's what we're looking at. So she is being very, very reflective in this card. and she's taking some time, and you can see how she's in a dark space, and you can see that she's had to go up many stairs to get there. So she's had to go out on her own and find this quiet time and this quiet contemplative, meditative, inward looking kind of place and process. And she needs that quiet. She needs that alone time. There is something that she needs to be able to see. And as she sits there, she becomes the light because she's finding and tapping into her inner light. And this is what is so important for all of us to realize while doing shadow work, is that you become the light in your shadows. And doing the inner work is damn hard. It's not easy, but it is a very profoundly shifting process. I just also quickly wanted to honor the ancestors. This cloth and this cloth link to two of my ancestors, my grandmother, maternal grandmother, and grandfather. And I often work with the way I set up for readings is often associated with something symbolic to me. So I just want to remind you of that as I sit here in this deep inward place, that even when we are alone, we are not alone. We have guides, we have ancestors, but still we have to do a lot of the sorting out seemingly on our own. And we also have more access to hearing our guides and our ancestors when we get more quiet and get more alone. But then we take that step of, I've gone on this hermitage, this pilgrimage to find some deep inner insight and light. And then there's a level of resistance, because now how do I bring it into my everyday world? So great. It's like that classic experience. If anybody's ever been on a retreat or to anything where it's very immersive, you go to this immersive thing and it's so amazing. Even if it's a yoga class and you come out and you're like, wow, that's changed my way of thinking. I feel so good. There was the group energy involved. Somebody was holding that space and facilitating, which is a skill not everybody does well. So you can tell when you've been well held and given space to experience something big. And then you get to your everyday life, and all the things you said you were going to do as a matter of new routine or new healthy habits just goes out the window, because you get straight back into the mundane reality of your chaotic life. This is kind of a little bit what this card is talking about, because pages are young energy. So it's like the part of you that can't be disciplined. Saturn is all about discipline. And in fact, all of the outer planets bring you a certain amount of discipline in their own sort of sphere, I would say, as well. Pluto for sure. Neptune and Uranus do it in a slightly different way, but there is this need with these outer planets for us to learn our lessons. And here there's almost like a youthful resistance. So how do I bring that down? So if we saw this card the right way up, look how grounding that is. It's an earth card. It's Pentacles. He is, or she, it's hard to tell in some of these cards, which is quite nice because it's not really based on gender. And even if I say he or she, think more just the internal masculine or feminine in you. But you can see this is a very rooted card if it's upright, knowing how to bring things down into reality, versus in its protective mode, it is struggling to do just that. But what I have said, because I think we got this last week or the week before, and I have said this many times before with this card, one of the things I love is upside down it mirrors the Hanged Man, which is also a major arcana card. And it's very Neptunian, and it's very much about surrender. So in some ways, you might have gone into this process, into this cave and hermitage space, and you've come back with all these lessons, and now you want to immediately implement everything, but the world around you is still the same, or it seems the same. It's still chaotic. You still have your deadlines. You still have your routine of getting your kids off to school or whatever it is. And you're like, well, I actually need to surrender to the reality that sometimes it's 1 degree of change. Sometimes I can't change everything in my life. And I think that's really important, because I know that I'm certainly like that. And I've seen this with so many of my clients. You decide to make some changes and you go too big. It's like go big or go home, and then you fail right quick. You fail the process. And then you just go straight back to where you were, like an ostrich, putting your head in the sand and just forgetting all those things you told yourself, because in essence you failed yourself, because you overcommitted to something and then you let yourself down, and it was so devastating that you just pretend it never happened and move on. But there's a wound there. So the surrendering, that sometimes it takes time to integrate the lessons you learned in your hermit space. And it might also bring up extra shadows. So you're going to kind of go home from your imaginary aha moment, your held retreat or yoga class or whatever it was. We're using obviously a metaphor. It can be many different things for you. You can listen to a podcast at home while you're making the dinner and just have a sudden realization. Anyway, it's going to bring up our tough stuff, okay? The devil is a card that will remind you of where all the darkness lies, where the parts of yourself that you don't want to address, that you wish weren't there, that you're embarrassed and ashamed of. Where are the places that you sell out? And what are you addicted to? This can be any type of addictions. So it's the obvious, like alcoholism or sex addiction or whatever, drug addiction, but it is also addiction to your cell phone, which is a problem, or to tech, or to food, which is a tricky one, or to cigarettes, or whatever your addictive things are. Workaholism. We all have spaces that allow us to avoid. And in essence, it's maybe something was brought to light. We weren't sure how to implement it right away or integrate it. This can also not just be about implementation, but integration. And now all of our dark tendencies are either coming to the surface and we are enacting them extra to avoid what we saw here, or we're beginning to realize them and we're feeling very guilty and ashamed and all of that. And we all have shadow traits. So that's not going to help you to get stuck in the loop of guilt and shame. So there is a level, I believe, of healthy guilt and shame, just where it's like, I feel ashamed, therefore maybe that's not a way that I want to be. But if you allow yourself to, I was ashamed that I did that was how I enacted something. I am not shameful myself, and think of the word shameful, shameful. So I don't want to be filled with that all the time. But I can feel that I shouldn't do that thing again or say that thing again because it made me feel that way. Okay, and then I love how we've got the Ace of Swords in protection, because the Ace of Swords is such a great Mercury retrograde card when it is upside down. Because again, it's reflecting backwards. And in fact, in this particular one, it's looking straight back into the devil, saying, whew, yeah, I see all those things that have been rising to the surface, and they are uncomfortable, and I really want to look forward. And so for those of us whose addictions tend to be taking action on things, getting too busy, being too productive, working, making sure everybody's been fed, making sure all of these things to avoid feeling, well, that is going to be uncomfortable for you right now, because you're not going to be able to as easily. But this is a good thing. This is a good thing. It's because it's time for you to look at where is it that the shame lies. Because if you're feeling as if you are somebody that should be ashamed, then instead of going, oh, I'm ashamed at how I handled that situation, there's a very big difference about that. It's like if somebody says, you are embarrassing, you are wrong, you are terrible, or, oh, no, that answer wasn't correct when the teacher asked you, or, oh, I've got some constructive crit around your project. That doesn't mean you are wrong, you are bad, but that's what we start to internalize with shame. That's where shame becomes a problem. I mean, if you were to go out and shoot someone, you should feel shame, because that wasn't a good thing to do. But that doesn't necessarily, don't shoot someone. That's a very extreme example, but it doesn't define your entire existence. There are consequences, however. Like Nelson Mandela, there was a consequence of going to jail for very many years for his crime that was done in many ways from his perspective for the right reasons, with the right message, but it was still a bomb, it was still not okay. And then he took the consequence and he transformed. So, I mean, he was already really brilliant before he went, but the man that came out of prison, having suffered those consequences, was like next level, world renowned, well respected forever. He will be a ascended master for all of us to work with forever. Because he didn't become shamed, he reflected deeply. He went, I don't know why Mandela, he's obviously working with us at the moment. He went into that cave, and that cave was a prison. It was enforced. And yet he did this work. he did this deep, deep work. And when he came out from all that reflection, he was a man that could shift the trajectory of this country in a way that nobody could have imagined. And sure, South Africa's got its problems, but the transition from apartheid to where we are now could have been a lot more violent. And so I think we really have to look at that reflectiveness and that coming face to face with the hard truths about ourselves, about society. These are important things. And I feel like this Mercury retrograde is very, very important for us to take this time now and to remember you're not meant to be comfortable all the time. How do we keep our nervous systems feeling safe because there is not a tiger in the lounge room, but also get uncomfortable enough to address what needs to change? Okay, I hope this has helped, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for all your likes, shares, comments, and subscribes.